good evening, and welcome. My name is Nick, and I help direct events here at the Strand. Before we launch into tonight's event with Caitlin Doughty, I'd like to share a little bit of history about the Strand. The Strand was founded in 1927 by Benjamin Bass on 4th Avenue's Book Row. Stretching from Union Square to Astor Place, Book Row gradually dwindled from 48 bookstores until, after 93 years, the Strand is the sole survivor, now run by third-generation owner Nancy Bass-Wyden. We want to thank all of you for your support. Without our loyal community of book lovers, we would not be here today. Tonight we are excited to have with us Caitlin Doughty to celebrate the paperback launch of her book, Will My Cat Eat My Eyeballs? Caitlin is a licensed mortician and the New York Times best-selling author of Smoke Gets in Your Eyes and From Here to Eternity. She created the Ask a Mortician web series and owns a funeral home in Los Angeles, California. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Caitlin to the stage.
Did I appear? Did I magically appear as if from behind a curtain? Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. This is so wonderful. I was thinking last night about how exactly a year ago, almost exactly a year ago, I was launching the hardcover version of Will My Cat Eat My Eyeballs at the Strand physically in New York. And if you don't believe that that feels in my body like it was 12 years ago, not 1 year ago, you haven't been living through a pandemic like I have, because I truly, truly cannot fathom that that was just a year ago. However, as much as I would like to be on a real, honest to gosh, tootling around North America book tour right now, I was looking at your comments before I came on here, and there are people from the Philippines, and there are people from Montreal, and there are people from Arizona, and there are people from all over the world that get to be here and be part of this book tour because of the magic of Crowdcast and Zoom. Nobody wants to talk about Zoom and how that's good, but it is in certain ways. I see that you're already commenting on my lobster earrings. Thank you so much. We'll address those before we start. These are actually from my literary agent, Anna Latterman, and she has gone a little bonkers like all of us the past couple months and started making acrylic earrings and jewelry for all her clients. And I am the proud beneficiary of these particular lobsters. So what I wanted to do tonight is talk about my death books, my most influential death-related books, the books that changed my life. And I realized after I committed to doing this idea that it's like choosing between your children. It's a real Sophie's Choice situation. It's incredibly dark. There are books left on that bookshelf over there across the room right now that I don't want to be over there because I also love them so much and they were so influential. So I also organized these in chronological order of when I discovered them. So the first book that I want to talk about is this one, Beauty Influencer. Hello. It's called Lucifer, The Devil in the Middle Ages by Jeffrey Burton Russell. And why I wanted to talk about this one, it's not really a death book, but I found this when I was maybe 18, 19 years old. I was just starting college at the University of Chicago. I was being more of an academic human being for the first time. And I read this book. I sat down and I think I just bought it because I was like, oh, wow, that seems like a vibe I would be interested in. And I remember sitting down and reading it and underlining almost everything and having this feeling of, wow, this is what I care about. This right here is what I care about and what I am interested in. And maybe I could spend my life going down rabbit holes like this. Like how Lucifer changed in the Middle Ages. And small spoiler as to how he changed throughout the Middle Ages, he was depicted sort of as the little black imp. You know what I'm talking about? Like when you look at early medieval art, you have Lucifer who's like, hey, I'm this small and I have little horns and I'm all black and like mischief. And then as we get into like Faust and as we get into the Renaissance, you start to see Lucifer become this kind of suave daddy vibe with the big like cap with the swooping feather and walking through the streets and doing ill and causing people of ill repute to be even more ill reputey. And just learning about this and reading an academic book that was readable and engaging and fun. And I really felt like I was where I was supposed to be in the world. And I think that feeling has never really left me. And even today, before I did this event, I went to my coffee shop in Los Angeles, which now has little outdoor socially distanced tables, and just read a book and was underlining some things and taking some notes and letting it inspire me. And that's one of the things that has defined my life and that I've really missed. Just being able to go out, eat some food, read a fun academic book about death. Speaking about fun academic books about death, this book I got right after I started working at the crematory in 2008. And it's Philip Airy's The Hour of Our Death. It's not looking very beautiful anymore. It's looking very sad because I've read it so many times. And this book was the book, it's kind of a collection of the understandings of death in the Western world through many years. Someone's putting links to purchase them, and that makes so much sense. So what I like about this one is that it really told me how different death in the Middle Ages was from death now. So when I talk about how in the Middle Ages they used to have bodies under the floorboards of the church and in the walls of the church and in the roof of the church, that was how wildly different graveyards and cemeteries and how we used to bury people was from how we do it now. Also, here's them talking about, I found some very weird old notes. I talked about the installation of a communal oven in the cemetery, and 25-year-old me wrote, "Death bread!" exclamation mark. And then the cemetery of Jay sold wine and beer in the cemetery. And I wrote death beer, because I guess that's what I was interested in at the time, bread and beer. The cemetery was a place for strolling, socializing, and merrymaking. It was a marketplace for announcements, auctions, proclamations, sentences, scene of community gatherings, promenade, an athletic field, a haven for illicit encounters and dubious professions. In short, the cemetery was the public square. It had the function of the public square, since it was the public place par excellence, the center of collective life. When I read that, I realized that I had never seen a cemetery as anything other than a place where you go and you're solemn and you walk around, and it can be beautiful and it can be lovely, but it's not a dynamic place, at least as we see it in modern America. And that's changing, but I think it's really been starting to change back in the last 10 years because of information like this. Like, hey, wait a second, there's so much more that we can use cemeteries, especially since they're one of the few green spaces that are still available to us now in big cities. Philip Airy's Hour of Our Death. This one you've probably heard me talk about a zillion times if you've followed me at all, which is The Denial of Death by Ernest Becker. This book, I think, is probably hands down the most influential book on my career, period. And I discovered this book when I was in my first year of mortuary school, which I guess would be 2010. And I was in the library in the death section, as I was wont to be. And I saw the spine and I saw The Denial of Death. And I was like, well, you know, that seems like something that I would read. And I picked it up. And from the very first page, it was like oh wow, here we are. This explains it to me. This is what explains our bad relationship with death, or our weird relationship with death, or our tense relationship with death. And one of the main principles in it is how humans can feel so sacred and think about the heavens and think about the cosmos and think about physics and think about biology and think about very, very small things and very, very big things. But then also realize that we're living in these bodies that are just going to decay and die. And how that tension can be incredibly difficult to live with. And so this is the section where it talks about that. And I'm just gonna read it. I'm doing a book event where I'm reading just from other books, which maybe is not the best way to promote my own books, but I think it's fine. We want people to read these books too. It's about death positivity and death engagement above all else. Man has a symbolic identity that brings him sharply out of nature. He is a symbolic self, a creature with a name, a life history. He's a creator with a mind that soars out to speculate about atoms and infinity, who can place himself imaginatively at a point in space and contemplate his own planet. This immense expansion, this dexterity, this ethereality, this self-consciousness gives man literally the status of a small god in nature, as the Renaissance thinkers knew. Yet, and this is a big yet, at the same time, as the Eastern sages also knew, man is a worm and food for worms. This is the paradox. He is out of nature and hopelessly in it. He is dual, up in the stars, and yet housed in a heart-pumping, breath-gasping body that once belonged to a fish and still carries the gill marks to prove it. His body is a material, fleshy casing that is alien to him in many ways. The strangest and most repugnant way being that he aches and bleeds and will decay and die. Man is literally split in two. He has an awareness of his own splendid uniqueness in that he sticks out of nature with towering majesty, and yet he goes back into the ground a few feet in order to blindly and dumbly rot and disappear forever. It is a terrifying dilemma to be in and to have to live with. What I love about Ernest Becker is that he really pulls no punches when he's talking about this. In the next page, he says how it seems that man is infinite worth in the timeless scheme of things and has a body that's worth about 98 cents. How to reconcile the two. And I know that we do a lot of work, especially in more modern, like wellness circles, to treat the body as a temple and to treat our bodies very well and to appreciate our bodies. And I do appreciate my body, but I do still think it's remarkable that we have these bodies that are going to decay and die, and yet our minds can shoot out into the cosmos and have all of this understanding. And I think no one describes that better, and how hard it is to live with this magical mind trapped in a human body like that, like Mr. Ernest Becker, Pulitzer Prize winner. Well deserved. Here's another book that was really important to me at the very beginning of my writing. The Sacred Remains, American Attitudes Towards Death, 1779 to 1883, by Gary Latterman. The reason that this book was so important to me is that if you've ever listened to a video of mine or an interview or read one of my books, you know that one of my big points of interest is the idea that traditional American death isn't the big expensive casket and embalming and the funeral director and the flowers and the hearse and going to the cemetery. Traditional American death, prior to the beginning of the 20th century, looks completely different. It looks much simpler. It looks much more family involved. It's much more community involved. And this is really the history of that. And he talks about how the services of the undertaker and this emerging role of the funeral director as trying to locate the corpse in a network of commercial activity that was beginning to operate in a heretofore untapped market. And that really says it how it is, right? There used to be no market for for what happens to the corpse. Like maybe you would help, sell the buggy that went through to clip-clopped through the town to take someone to their grave. Or maybe you would help bring in mourning rings or mourning pamphlets, or maybe you would help with the coffin, help someone in your local area with a coffin. But for the most part, this was family and this was community that did all the body care. And so when you have this rise of people, so the corpse was entering this commercial network, and it was assumed into a strict municipal bureaucracy in the urban centers. So it really is clear how we entered into a death care system that's now incredibly commercial and incredibly bureaucratic and not working for a lot of people, but I'll get off my soapbox for the moment on that. This one I'm not going to read from, but I just wanted to mention it because I did look up on YouTube how to pronounce this man's name, which I never actually looked up. It's Romanian, and it's Mircea Eliade. Mircea Eliade. Anyway, he's Romanian. And this book, Sacred and the Profane, is a very important book in religious history. And I think that at the very beginning, as I was writing Smoke Gets in Your Eyes, this was incredibly helpful thinking about what the corpse really is, because you know that I am fascinated by the corpse, and I love the corpse, and I love the corpse's place in culture and how we react to it and how we fear it and how we approach it and then we avoid it. And I think Sacred and the Profane is a very good way to describe that distinction. Because on one hand, the corpse, the dead body, we know we can't just throw it in the trash, right? Because it is sacred. It is still mom somehow. It still has an essence of the human that it was. But at the same time, we're kind of repulsed by the dead body. A lot of people, we're turned off by it, and we don't know that we want to be around it. And is it going to smell? And is it going to decay? And is it going to be eaten by worms? Like, ew, 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 ew. So how do you, as a human, reconcile those two things? The sacred and the profane. I'm going to stop for a sip of water. Maybe I'll just slide out of the book. No, I can't even slide out of the frame, so I'm just awkwardly in the corner doing this. I look like a wino. Okay, this book, ooh, you're going to love this one. I love this book so, so, so much. It's called Charming Cadavers. Look at that cover. Such a good cover. Charming Cadavers, Historic Figurations of the Feminine in Indian Buddhist Hagiographic Literature, which doesn't sound like a thrilling title, but I mean, it's called Charming Cadavers. That's obviously a charming title, by Liz Wilson. And this is a book about how monks, early Buddhist monks, would meditate at the charnel houses or meditate on the charnel grounds. So when you had bodies that were less, from less fortunate families or low-income families, they would be taken to these charnel grounds to decompose. And the monks, in order to shed their attachment to worldly things and goods, they would go to the charnel ground and they would meditate on the dead and decaying bodies, which you can't do now in the United States, unfortunately. But I think in theory, it's still a very interesting idea about the way that serious, prolonged meditation on the very real fact that we are going to die and we are going to decay can actually help improve your life and help you shed some of the ideas about who you are and how attached you are to your body and how attached you are to the idea of permanence and not eventually decaying and dying. But what this scholar does really well is make it clear that very often these monks were using women in a way, using them to be the bodies that they meditate on, specifically because they were trying to get rid of sexual desire for women. So there was one part of this book that was so fascinating. It was almost like women are actually decaying flesh bags, and they're kind of trying to trick you the same way that women do with like makeup in the swimming pool. You know, the kind of modern like meme of like, you have to take a girl swimming to see what she's really looks like without makeup. It was like, oh, you have to peel off the woman's flesh to see that she's really a decaying sack of organs underneath. It was a little much, but here's a quote from it. In their role as teachers, she's talking about the decaying charnel body women here, as their role in teachers, they did not utter a single word. What they have to teach is not what's on their minds, but what's going on in their bodies. So even within this kind of magical, important, meditative thing, there's still the fact that these women were kind of just being used as objects to make men better and less attached to the world. So fascinating books, changed a lot of things for me. Decaying flesh sack shirt. I think that's lovely. I'll talk to Sarah Chavez about maybe a decaying flesh sack shirt. I'm for it. It's like a Future Corpse, except more explicit. Remember, Ernest Becker has told us we're trying to be more explicit here. Okay, so this one, Bern Heinrich's Life Everlasting, The Animal Way of Death. This is actually one I would say that I would recommend right now, really, because one, it's not a real academic book. It has academic elements to it, but it's not specifically an academic book, which I have had some trouble reading academic books recently. I've had some trouble reading any books, and I read books all the time. But the pandemic has just shortened my little attention span just right down to a nub. So, and it's not been, here's some old notes that I didn't even see. Let's read some old notes. Universe, mammoths, brain fight or flight, religions because of death, death in society. Write this weekend. That advice works at any time you find it. Caitlin, write this weekend. So this is about Bern Heinrich he's a biologist, and he has a house in Maine. And his friend asks him, can I have a green burial on your property? And he's been a biologist his whole career. He's so interested in the natural world. And this really sets him off on this desire to discover how death is working in the forest of Maine around his cabin at all times, and how there's this cycle of life and death that's always going. And he really likes beetles, and he really likes ravens, which excellent taste, as I would have to say. So if you're interested in the way that nature engages death and the way that happens, I really recommend this book. Here's a little part of it. Vultures, regardless of affiliation, are specialized carrion scavengers of large animals. Many prefer fresh meat, and some, like the black vultures of the Americas, will, like ravens, hunt live prey. Few other scavengers, such as wild pigs, dogs, and eagles, can compete with vultures for decomposed meat, because they are able to metabolize and detoxify natural bacterial biotoxins. Their habit of feeding on rotten carrion in warmer regions seems to work to these vultures' advantage, perhaps in part because it makes them taste bad and few animals will eat them. Indeed, they use their partially digested food in projectile vomit as defense. And if that tactic alone doesn't work, some play possum, which is presumably the most effective if their feathers are soiled and they smell appropriately necrotic after a rotten meal. So, I love vultures. I love vultures so much. Who doesn't? We could just do a whole vulture appreciation night here on one of these book events. But the idea that vultures not only can take in rotting meat and digest it the way no other animal does, but they're protecting themselves by just projectile vomiting and vomiting this rotting meat all over themselves. So when other animals come to prey on them, they just smell like a dead animal. They've really cornered the market on using decay and death to their advantage. God bless them for it. Severed, A History of Heads Lost and Heads Found by Francis Larson. This is another book that's very it's not poppy, but it's a nice narrative. It's a nonfiction book that will not take a lot out of you, which is what we all need right now. This book was really helpful to me when I did the video, sorry, microphone, many years ago about the Shrunken Heads and the Shrunken Head trade. And I don't know if you heard about this, but Pitt's River Museum, which is a major museum in England, just removed the shrunken heads and the human remains from their displays to have better conversations with indigenous people about the remains, which is great. I'm all for the display of human remains if those conversations have been had and they're properly contextualized and it's actually educational. It's not just like, oh, a shrunken head. But one of the things I remember about this book that I wanted to bring up here is that decapitation, and they're talking about decapitation as far as a method of state killing. So as opposed to a gas chamber, or opposed to firing squad, or opposed to lethal injection. What does it mean to decapitate someone? And in fact, decapitation is thought to be incredibly painful, but it's probably actually the most humane way to die, because it's very quick, it's very clean. Decapitation, they believe, may only cause acute pain for a second or two, and then it's over and you're gone. So it might actually be the most humane way to have state-sponsored death. And I don't agree with state-sponsored death, but I think that if you are going to murder one of your citizens, you should almost have to decapitate them, because you should have to make it totally clear that you are doing like a horrific thing to another human. And you have to make it the easiest and cleanest possible, and the one that implicates you the most in the actual death. And that would be decapitation. So I'm not sure I'm gonna, make my career on becoming a decapitation advocate, but that's something interesting that I learned from that book. All right, this book was so important to me. You probably remember this. If you read Smoke Gets in Your Eyes, you probably remember this story about the Wari in Brazil, which is the tribe that until about 50 years ago still used cannibalism. And that book is Consuming Grief: Compassionate Cannibalism in an Amazonian Society by Beth Conklin. Consuming Grief. And this book, I don't remember why I even picked it up. I don't remember how I got it, but I read it, and it was a time where, and this is anybody who does a job for a very long period of time, I never get sick of death. Don't get me wrong, never get sick of death. But sometimes you feel like you've read all the books and you've heard it all, and you understand all the main basics, and nothing feels like it surprises you as much anymore. But then I read this book and read about why they were cannibals and the reasons that they did what they did. And it just blew my mind open and got me so excited about continuing on with writing Smoke Gets in Your Eyes and continuing on doing this work. And so I'll read a little bit here. So what's important to know about this is that the Wari, they weren't cannibals because they were hungry. They weren't cannibals because they were, destroying their enemies. They were cannibals. They were mortuary cannibals within their own tribe, because they did not want the body to be in the cold ground. They thought that was completely wrong. And so they wanted to consume the body. And it wasn't the direct family members like the wife or the child that did it. It was the in-laws. And when you consumed the body, you were doing a huge favor for the immediate relatives. So it was this real show of love to be a cannibal in the society. One theme running through Wari funeral practices is the attempt to prevent corpse substances from being lost to the earth. When corpses were cut, relatives often tried to keep the body fluids from spilling onto the ground or into the fire. As an expression of love and respect, a close kinsman sometimes lay face down on a mat, crying and supporting the corpse on his back as it was butchered, so that the fluids would flow onto his own body rather than onto the ground. And then finally, after being washed, the body pieces were usually placed directly on the decorated roasting rack over the fire kindled from the special decorated bundles of firewood. And then, you know what happens next. They would eat them. But it just totally changed my perception on what a cannibal means. All right, this one is a more recent. I actually read this one a couple years ago, and I loved it. And I didn't do much with it, but it's become especially relevant because of the video that we did earlier this year about why Black funeral homes are separate from white funeral homes in the United States. And that book is Passed On, African American Mourning Stories by Carla F.C. Holloway. Passed On. And this book is just fantastic. When we talk and we rail against the funeral industry, we're mainly talking about the white corporate capitalist funeral industry and the traditions that have sprung up around that in the 20th century. And you have all of these terrible stories of, even after slavery ended, you had Black people in the United States saying, okay, now we have our own towns, we have our own areas, we're ready to start our own funeral homes. And the white funeral homes in the town simultaneously did not want them to do that, did not want them to have that sort of economic freedom to take care of their own dead, and didn't want them at the same time. They didn't want them in their own funeral homes. They made the Black bodies come in through the back door and, hide, leave them in the basement to do any embalming or any work on them. And the family couldn't come as a large group for a wake or a funeral at their establishment. So I think it's the kind of definition of white power in that era, that not only did they not want Black bodies at their funeral home, they were like, oh no, but you can't do it yourself either, because that's too much economic freedom. Here's a really interesting story. In upstate New York, one Black family habitually remained at the graveyard after the funeral service. After the other mourners left, the family members brought out hammers and axe handles to bang and dent the casket before it was lowered into the grave. The mortician who told me this story keeps telling them, we don't reuse these caskets, begging them not to destroy their purchase. But they want to make certain that after they were through with it, there were damaged goods left behind. And it's pitiful to see. But the reason they were doing that is because they kept getting so screwed. They kept getting, people who would basically dump the bodies in a grave and then take the casket and use it again. So they were just making sure this casket was going to stay in the ground and stay with their loved one. And yeah, it really explains very clearly. If you're interested beyond the video that we did, this is an excellent book. All right, we have just a few more. I'll go a little quicker because I want to leave time for questions. This book, very incredible, Death in the New World, Cross-Cultural Encounters, 1492 to 1800, basically about how, white people arrived from Europe and sort of systemically made the indigenous people change their burial customs and their funeral customs. And many of them were so cool, were so interesting. So again, when we talk about the American way of death, what are we really talking about? Two more. The Land of Open Graves by Jason De Leon. If you saw the video that we did, I think it's called Vultures, Migrants, and something, but it was probably 2 years ago. But this is the anthropologist who worked identifying bodies in the Sonoran Desert, where migrants were crossing from Mexico and other Latin American countries into the United States. And you may remember the main experiment that came out of this, which was they took pigs because pigs, we know, are often used in decay and decomposition experiments because pigs are closest to humans as far as how they decay and how they decompose and how they're eaten. So they took pigs and they dressed them up in little human clothes, similar to what migrants would be wearing when they were crossing the desert, caps and shoes and t-shirts and shorts. And they dressed the pigs up and they left them out with cameras to study what would happen. And what they found is that they were eaten by vultures and torn apart and decomposed remarkably quickly, far, far quicker than anybody thought, and that those bodies would just disappear. They were just gone. And so we think we know how many migrants have died because of US border policies of crossing the desert, but we actually have no idea because through anthropology, we realized that those bodies just like disappear into nothing immediately, which they didn't think about because the desert, you think that a body is going to stay there forever, but not in that desert. It's a brutal place. Final book that I'm going to recommend. This is the book that I've read most recently that I've really been like, this is great. This is a really solid book. It's changed my perception. And that is Leila Taylor's Darkly, Black History and America's Gothic Soul. This book is about a young writer. She's Black, she's goth, and I sort of thought that it was going to be more about her experience as being a Black goth, and there is some of that, which is very entertaining and very good, but it's also a real, like, profound reckoning of what it means to be a Black person right now connected to death. And one thing that she mentions in it, which I had never thought of, which is actually kind of was really brilliant, is I studied very carefully I studied very carefully the Middle Ages. I mean, yes, I did study very carefully the Middle Ages. I studied the Middle Ages, and especially what I was interested in was the late medieval macabre, the art of the macabre, and the fact that in the 1400s, because of the plague, because of war, we became obsessed as a culture with all of these dancing skeletons and bloated bodies and all these images and stories about death. And she brings the concept that Black lives in the 21st century have anything in common with the Europeans of the 1400s. It's their intimate relationship with death. So that we're actually sort of living through another period of the macabre because Black people feel so surrounded by death and their whole lives have to be steeped in this idea of death and the potential for their own deaths. And there was also a story about the African-American burial ground in Manhattan. And it's basically this huge building with offices and courthouses and banks and shops that was just built right over the top of this African-American burial ground. And she talks about this proposal that an artist made that in every elevator, in every building above the burial ground, it should have to say, "You are now suspended above the African burial ground." And she said, that's it, a lovely little shove out of the historical amnesia that we experience every day, and a reminder as we float above Starbucks and the stock exchange of the spectral undercurrent of Black and brown blood that has built this country. It's good stuff. Very good stuff. So that is it. That is my list of books that I think are, again, it feels so incomplete because I have so many that I just love so much. But those are the ones that I, even as I was looking at the bookshelf now, spoke to me, reminded me so much of this. This experience has made me want to read them all again. And I'm really glad that I got to do this. Thank you for bearing with me as we did this. Now let's do questions. It doesn't have to be about books. Let's do questions about anything. We're here. We're quite at our leisure.
Hello, I've come back to facilitate the questions.
Excellent.
That was really interesting stuff, by the way. Macabre, obviously, but just, a field in which I've traditionally shielded my eyes.
You can read all these books too.
Yes.
The
yes,
Strand has many of them available, I see.
Yeah. I'm one of the cringe normies who fears death.
Well, you're in the right place. You have literally hundreds of people here. Just everybody tell Nick that he's welcome in our community, and we'd love to tell him we love his shirt. We'd love to tell him more about corpses.
Thank you. I love this shirt too. All right, so let's start with a question that I saw earlier and really liked. So I'm going to start with that one. Hi, Caitlin. Our favorite epitaph in our local cemetery in Massachusetts is one that reads, quote, "He did the best he could," end quote.
Oh.
What is your favorite / the funniest epitaph you have come across?
Oh, I mean, I like that one. Now, I think that like for this time that we are in, that's the epitaph we need for this current moment, right? Like he did the best he could. I had an old postcard that was of a gravestone, and it was a woman with big kind of fluffy teased hair, and she was on the phone, and the epitaph said, Jesus called and Kim answered. And I just really love that one. Someone mentioned a SpongeBob tombstone in the comments. That's not an epitaph, but we should actually do a video about that, because I'm actually not going to talk about it because it's a bonkers story, and you've just inspired me as a potential video idea. So, yoink.
Interesting. Incidentally, there is a comment from another viewer underneath that question I just asked, and they said, "My grandfather says, quote, I told you I was sick."
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah,
that's pretty good.
But I'm going to write that one down, the one that just did the best you can.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I always love, back to the medieval macabre, can't drag me away from there. I love memento mori or mori style headstones that are like, as I am, so you will be. Look upon my decaying body. This will be you someday. Ha ha ha. Like those kind of like challenging ones that are like, hey, by the way, you're going to decompose. I always like those. Those are my favorite.
Yeah, those are pretty cool. Let's see. Got another one. Hi, Caitlin. We love your work. Question. If you could be the lead medical examiner at any point in world history, where, when, and why?
Oh, man. Okay. Well, I'll tell you where I'm most needed as a medical examiner is right now, because we have a real shortage of medical examiners. So if any of you are I wanted to be a medical examiner when I was in 10th grade, and I was very interested in forensics, and I knew this is what I wanted to do. And then I took AP Bio, and those dreams were just cut out from under me, because you have to go to medical school to become a medical examiner or a coroner. And yeah, so I'm not that, obviously. That's not what my book is. What would I be most interested in? I mean, I guess you can think about like famous bodies. I think I would want to be the medical examiner for a case where they think the person is still alive, like an Elvis or a Tupac. So you would be the one person who like saw them dead and signed their death certificate and did the autopsy or did all that, and then you would be the one person who had the link between the reality of their death. But that's just kind of a tabloidy thing that I'd be interested in. I don't know. Yeah.
Sounds like it requires some thought.
It does require. These are good questions.
These are really good questions, and this next one is also super thought-provoking. It's a bit of a lengthy one, but I would just like to read the entire thing.
On. Yeah.
What is the difference between death positivity and romanticizing death? Is there any difference? As someone who has had their fair share of quote-unquote dark thoughts, sometimes I struggle with discussing death positivity with others because I feel like I'm somehow encouraging death, in quotations, which I'm not. I just want to make people aware of advanced directives.
Yeah, that's so sweet. I just want people to know about advanced directives. Why wouldn't they have this conversation? Yeah, I think there's a huge difference between death positivity and romanticizing death. And if anything, I would say that death positivity is almost the opposite of romanticizing death, because death positivity is like here for reality. We love reality. We love the reality of death and dying in this country. We're aware that it's unequal. We're aware that there are real systemic problems. We're aware that we live in this like capitalistic hellscape of an industry. We're aware that there are problems with Medicare. We're aware there's problems with hospice. We are aware of all these problems. We are not romanticizing death in any way. But what we are saying, the positivity aspect, comes from the idea that we are positive about the impact of conversations and the impact of those hard discussions to benefit society and to engage society and to help move society out of this real denial-y relationship that we have with death, especially in the Western world. And so it's not romanticizing death. I think that there's a really good blog that we have on the Order of the Good Death about death positivity and suicide. And you didn't bring up suicide there, but I think that you were kind of getting to the idea that for some people, when you talk about death positivity, people are like, does that mean you want to die? Does that mean that you're obsessed with death? Does that mean, all of those, does that mean, like pearl clutching, what's wrong with you? And same with a recent blog about death positivity and therapy, and how you should be able to go to therapy and be able to talk about these things openly without anybody thinking that there's something wrong with you. And it's going to be tough because you're going to have communities like this where everybody is super excited to have these conversations, and we know the positive intentions of these conversations. But if it's not immediately obvious to someone, it's going to be a hard conversation. But that's what being a warrior on the front lines means, is being willing to believe in these conversations and have these difficult conversations, even when people think they're a little weird, or it's your family and they're like, what are you thinking? So thank you for continuing to have those conversations, even though they're hard and not everybody totally gets it. It's important.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, I think a lot of people tend to just freeze up at the mere thought.
Like Nick here, but after spending an hour with us, don't you feel like a little more intrigued, a little more comfortable, a little more, maybe little things are shifting in your brain?
Very early on, yeah, I felt the wrinkles forming because I was just sort of examining what it means to live a bit differently, and like the arc, just the punctuation of death, and being like, it isn't necessarily a inherently bad thing if you just...
No, well, that's the cool thing, because death and the deadlines, emphasis on dead, as I say, that are inherent in death, are what gives life its rich meaning and becomes like the tapestry of why life is worth living, because we know we don't have that long to live. And you can't have, you wouldn't be doing this job. You wouldn't be working so hard to put on all these events and to promote books and to do these things if I was like, by the way, you're going to live another 600 years. You'd be like, why am I working so hard on my career and to do these things for people if I'm just going to, if I have forever to putter around here? It's the fact that that you're going to die that gives you a sense of urgency and meaning in the work that you do.
True, very true.
This has just turned into a let's convert Nick from the Strand section.
Yes. I'll announce my resignation live on stream. No, I'm kidding.
Someone said exciting to watch Nick start this death acceptance journey in real time.
Yes. Next question. Are you working on another book? If not,
I don't want to talk about it. La 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 la.
If not, there's a second part which may be better. I don't know. If not, what would you want to write about next?
Oh man, let me tell you. If I knew what I wanted to write about, I would be writing about it. No, I am working on something else. It's going slower because I think that it's going to be a really, I don't want to say exciting time, but it's going to be a really interesting time moving out of the pandemic. And the idea that every time there's been a major mass death event in the US history, there's been a real change in funeral service and how funerals are done and how death is looked at by society. And the fact that we're hopefully by next year again going to be moving out of this terrible mass death event, things will change. And there does need to be a plan to move forward and how to think about that. And I think I'm putting a lot of pressure on myself to be one of those voices and to have a strong, clear vision about what is possible. And especially right in the middle of the pandemic where everything is going on, it's harder to figure out how to capture that and write that. And so that's where I am right now. I am writing and I'm working very hard, but do I have like a clear idea of what it's going to be or exactly when to expect it or how to, present it to you? Not yet, alas.
That's all right. Can't rush it. Can't rush genius.
Exactly. You can't rush genius. That was what I was going to say. Can't rush genius.
I got you. Here's one with a bit of room for interpretation, I think. What is the most non-traditional burial ritual you've learned about or encountered?
That's a hard question because not, traditional if we've learned anything from the United States death industry is that like traditional doesn't really mean anything. Like traditional just means like what 20th century, corporate death industry says it means. That's not actually tradition. And so, if I go to another country and I see mummies or I see, bodies being burned on pyres or any of these magical, wonderful things, that's tradition to them. So it's very felt and it's very real and it's very traditional to them, and it's just non-traditional to a Western eye. So I think the number one thing I've learned is that just when you're able to travel around the world and see different death customs, is that everybody has the same intentions when it comes to death. They have the same desire to respect the person who has died and do the right thing. Everybody wants to do the right thing so bad, and it's what society around them tells them is the right thing that is what ends up happening for the most part. So that's not a super thrilling answer, but I love to dissect the word traditional as just a fun afternoon thing.
I think the most unconventional death ceremony I know of is Hunter S. Thompson. How he got his ashes fired out of a cannon, I believe.
Yeah. Well, I have a whole series on my YouTube channel called Iconic Corpse that I think you would like. So
Wow.
It's about corpses who have done things that we never expected them to do.
That's a great plug. Everyone should go watch that. I mean, everyone here has already seen it, I'm sure. So this is mainly...
Maybe not. If you haven't, come on down.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, so this one is interesting. Okay, my father-in-law told me when making death plans to, quote, donate your body to science, end quote, have a follow-up plan for when they are done with you, because his friend was donated to science and then delivered to his front porch when they were done, and his wife wasn't home to receive him right away, so he defrosted on the deck. How true is this, is the question.
I have never, if that is true, I want to talk to this wife. I want to talk to all of these people. That did not happen. I could see that happening at a funeral home or someone dropped him off at a funeral home, but they would never, like, to be fair, scientific donation companies, especially in the United States, are private companies. They're private corporations, and when you have private corporations run by people, there are going to be people who do stupid things and win stupid prizes. So is it possible that, like, some dead body that had been used for, plastic surgery practice or rotator cuff surgery practice or drug companies or whatever it was used for was then delivered to the wrong place. Yes, I think that's possible. But was that body just dumped back on their loved one's porch? No, I have never heard that. I have never heard that. Although if it's true, I want to learn all about it and appreciate it.
The debunking is comforting.
Yeah, no, I have never. I am pretty sure that would be a story that I was already like deeply into and on top of, and had already done a video about at this point, because that sounds like extremely my thing. But
yeah,
I don't think so.
All right. We got into this a little bit, but I think there's a bit of specificity here. It's my friend's birthday soon, and I was planning on giving her a copy of Will My Cat Eat My Eyeballs and an end-of-life planner so she can keep her final wishes and affairs in one place. For you and I, it's a great gift, but for my possibly not-so-death-positive friend, is this a good gift? I want to spread awareness, but don't want to be that person, quote, another year gone, and oh yeah, there's something for your impending death, end quote. Maybe add a bottle of wine and some Cheetos to the gift bag.
Yeah, no, I think that's good advice. I'd say maybe choose between Will My Cat Eat My Eyeballs and the End of Life Planner. Like, unless I think that whole package is a really great idea if to your death positive friend. Like, if your friend is a death positive person and you get them a whole death themed gift of goodies, like that's a really great gift. But if your friend is not so into it and you're like, here's this whole theme gift, it's like somebody got me a whole theme gift about hockey. Like, I don't know the first thing about hockey. I'm gonna be like, not only did you get me this hockey jersey, you got me this hockey puck and this like little stuffed hockey guy and a guide to hockey. Like, I'm not interested in any of this. Why did you get me this whole theme package gift? Whereas if you got me one gift about like a specific thing that you were really interested in, paired with, like some wine, some other things, and you just kind of slipped. And that's what I think. I'd like to think Will My Cat Eat My Eyeballs does that really well, because it's supposed to be a fun book. It's supposed to be something that literal children can read, that adults can read and enjoy and engage with and find fun in. And it's not supposed to be threatening. It's not supposed to be difficult to read. It's not supposed to be like, look upon this, confront your own mortality. So I think it's a nice, maybe more so than either of my first two books. It's a really nice intro. It's a slow intro into facing your own death, sort of around the corner. But yeah, I just pick one. I pick one of those things. It's fine if it's not Will My Cat Eat My Eyeballs, but just pick one of those things and put in some other like food or something, and then see how they react to that, and then go from there with other gifts.
Wise words. All right, we're getting short on time, but I want to fit in at least two more questions. So
okay, let's do it.
Hello, Caitlin. As a writer that wants to talk about death with kids, specifically middle grade kids, what is your best advice for writing about death for young readers and ways to approach talking about more the good death concepts?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that you already, as someone who's steeped in this world, and to be fair, like I wasn't steeped in the middle grade world when I wrote this book, but I just did the thing that I set out to do, which is like, I'm the weird aunt who's going to be totally honest with you and tell you all these truths, and I'm not here to talk down to you. I'm just going to talk to you like a little adult, because that's what you are. I think that it's an attempt to be really honest with children and not talk down to them and not treat them as fragile little beings. So yeah, I think that whatever you do, and you will do this, just make your main principle honesty, and make your main principle treating them as small adults, and know that they love gross shit. Like, adults love gross shit too, but kids really love gross shit. They love to hear about decomposing bodies, and they love to hear about like the literal facts of what's going on when they find the dead deer by the side of the road, and lean into that.
Kids are smart.
Lean into decomposition is always my answer, I think.
Okay, let's see.
Is this our last question?
I'm trying to decide.
No, that went by so fast.
Last two. How about that?
Okay. All right.
Last two. Because I think the last one will be a great capper.
Okay.
How surreal was it for you to see/hear yourself on a Netflix show? Did you know ahead of time that you would end up in an animated show when you went on Duncan Trussell's podcast?
No. So Duncan Trussell, the show that he's talking about is they're talking about is Midnight Gospel. And it's on Netflix if you haven't seen it. The whole show is like a really weird, trippy show. It's very good.
I want to watch that.
Yeah, I
saw a preview for it. It looks bananas.
We are indoctrinating you one by one. Yeah, so it's really great. It's totally bizarre. It's totally good. Very, very, very enjoyable. I went on his podcast 2 years ago, and I just went as like a normal guest, like you go on a podcast. But then with the guy who created Adventure Time, they created the show together, and they picked their like 7 favorite podcast guests, or the 7 podcast guests that they felt fit this arc of the show, and they pulled all the stuff from the podcast, me just like ranting about the funeral industrial complex, animated it with me as Death, and then brought me into the studio to have me do all of the filler like transition things. So I went into the studio and in Hollywood and like, made weird noises and growled and talked in a weird language and did fun voiceover stuff, which I've never really gotten to do in that way. And then it's amazing because it was really like a weird animated version of my advocacy being available to people. Like, how many advocates get like a totally bizarre, trippy explanation of their advocacy to reach people that they would never normally reach? So it's fantastic. I love the show, and I'm really glad I got to be a part of it.
That is really cool. I'm such a tremendous fan of Adventure Time, so when I heard that Pendleton created this, I was like,
especially since you're like a burgeoning fan of Death, as we know you are, and you like Adventure Time, you will love this. You'll love it.
Check it out. I gotta check it out. All right. Final question of the evening, folks. If we didn't get to your question, I'm so sorry. We only have so much time, but I hope you have enjoyed the ones that we did get to ask. I'm going into college this year as a major in mortuary science. Any advice to help me prepare before entering? By the way, love your content.
Oh, thank you. It's not going to be easy, my child. It will not be. You're not a child, but it will not be easy, my friend. But we really need you. We need good people who have different ideas about the funeral industry, who have exciting new ideas about the funeral industry, who see things differently, who want things to be more equitable. And if you have those things, those principles will see you through the dark times and all the unnecessary bureaucratic testing and possibly working for an old man who doesn't believe in any of the things you're saying. But eventually, you will come and you will own the funeral home and you will help change the death industry. And so just remember those things and move forward.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being here tonight. This was actually really, really fascinating.
Of course. Thank you for all the great questions. And thank you, everyone, again, for putting up with me just talking through my books. It's a strange time, but I appreciate you.
What a great insight into your library. I'm sure everyone is delighted. On that note, though, speaking of books, as you were mentioning the books, I was feverishly looking on our website and then trying, if we had it, putting the link in the chat, But if those at home do not yet have a copy of Will My Cat Eat My Eyeballs, you can buy one right now through the green button that I'm pointing at right here. It says purchase Will My Cat Eat My Eyeballs. Click on that. It'll take you to our Square interface, and you can buy one from us and support independent bookstores.
Yes, support independent bookstores. And I think that I am making a list for the Strand of my favorite books.
I
And
believe that is happening. Yes.
I think that I'm going to, and I don't know exactly when it'll come out, probably in October, but I think that I do want to make it a themed list of my favorite death books. So I think that a lot of these books, plus probably more, will be in that list and available. I'll share it on social media and such.
That means we'll have to order some, you know?
Yeah, treat yourself.
That's right. All
You
right.
deserve it.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, everyone, for coming.
Bye,
And
everyone.
big thanks to Caitlin, most of all.
Yeah, thank you all. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate you. This was very, very painless. I wish I could be there to hug you in person, but alas, you know. Here, I'll do this, and you can Photoshop a little picture of yourself in, and there we go. We went to an event together, the two of us. Okay.
All right. And if you missed your opportunity to take the screenshot, you can watch this event again if you use the same link and the same password, if you're on Credcast. If it's on Facebook Live, I believe it just lives there for a time. But yeah, anyway, enough of that. Have a great night, everyone.
Bye. Happy death, everyone.
Happy death.
Explode in a thing of light.
Right.